Hello everyone, today I will tell you about the film All Quiet on the Western Front. Enjoy watching. Before watching, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment. I'm trying to develop this channel, and your support is the only thing I have. The film opens with a forest in Germany in 1917. The view switches to a field strewn with bodies. A machine gun fires, bullets fly. German soldiers in the trenches prepare to attack, climbing up ladders under fire. Some fall, but the rest continue to fight. In the next scene, the survivors sort out the bodies. Bloody clothes are removed from the dead, which are sent to the laundry, where they are washed and dried. Clean laundry is taken back to the front. The main character is a young man named Paul. He is riding his bike to his graduation. His classmates signed up with the volunteers for the front, but his father did not sign the permission. The guy has to forge a signature so as not to break away from the group. The volunteers listen to an inspiring speech from the director, who calls them the pride of the nation. He is sure that in a couple of weeks they will enter Paris. The young men greet the phrase with joyful cries. Soon the volunteers receive their uniforms. Paul can't hide his joy, but notices a tag with someone else's name on it. The officer tears it off, saying that the uniform was too small for the previous owner. There's a pile of tags lying under the table, and so the recruits march off to war in joyful ranks, their faces filled with impatience and anticipation. The action moves to the north of France. The lieutenant directs Paul's squad right in the back of a truck. The youth joyfully chant, "Welcome to Paris." A medic stops the truck. The wounded need to be transferred, which means that they will have to go on foot from here. Before they can reach the trenches, explosions thunder nearby. The command to gas sounds. Paul helps his comrade put on a gas mask, but he himself doesn't have time, which doesn't escape the commander's attention. He tells them not to take it off until lights out. The arrival at the position is marred by rain. Taking off Paul's gas mask, the commander orders those who have arrived to scoop water out of the trench. The hero meets Kaczynski, who teaches him how to warm his frozen hands. Scooping up water with mess tins, the classmates say that this is not how they imagined the war. On night watch, the friends discuss how the first Frenchman will be killed. Their optimism has not yet evaporated. Hearing the noise, they look through the sights. But it is rats gnawing at the corpse. Suddenly, a return shot flies into Paul's head. He falls on the sandbank, but the bullet only knocked off his helmet. A veteran who came up advised them not to stand and to change positions after each shot, which the young people do. Later, the shelling begins. The young men are ordered to hide in a bunker. A school friend has hysterics from the roar of explosions. The veterans say that the artillery has advanced a little further. The Franks are advancing. Another recruit loses his nerve. He wants to leave, ignoring the commander's order. He barely gets out of the opening when he is torn to pieces by a nearby explosion. The bunker's support sag. The commander calls for everyone to leave the building, but not everyone has time to do so. Paul is collecting dog tags of the dead when he steps on glasses in the mud, the same as his classmates. His body lies nearby. The hero cannot hold back his tears until a scream brings him to his senses, and he returns to collecting dog tags. Later, the bloody dog tags are sorted through at headquarters, compiling lists of the dead. With the list, the official goes to the head of the Armistice Commission, Erzberger. He has to report on the losses to headquarters. In occupied France, Paul rolls in a truck across the snowy expanses. After going out into the field, he and Kaczynski wander towards a lonely farm, where an older comrade climbs over a fence. Voices and barking dogs are heard. Kaczynski runs out with a goose and runs away. Paul runs after it, while the owner shoots at them. Returning, the soldiers have dinner, enjoying the fresh meat. Later, they see peasant women passing by. One of them, Franz, runs to meet them and offers to take the girls home. When the mail is brought, Kaczynski receives a letter from his wife, which Paul reads out loud to him. It is clear from it that he had a son, but he died. Franz returns at night. Paul warns that they will set out in the morning to search for the missing battalion. While Erzberger moves towards the front line, Kaczynski's detachment inspects the forest. They pass a mortar crater, noticing a body hanging from a tree. The soldiers reach the train station, where there was a gas attack. While they are inspecting the depot, Kropp tears off a poster with a woman. Paul finds dozens of dead bodies in a corner room. A missing battalion of recruits from among yesterday's school children who took off their gas masks too early. He reports to the general that the French are preparing an offensive. The commander himself is against peace and is ready to fight to the last German. Fresh troops will soon arrive and he orders a strike. Meanwhile, Erzberger is traveling by train to Compiègne for armistice negotiations. He is rehearsing a speech in a compartment when the train stops. Kaczynski's detachment is awakened in the middle of the night and told to pack up. They are sent to the front line. A column of trucks creeps along the road. Driving closer to the front line, the drivers turn off their headlights so as not to attract unnecessary attention. The soldiers cover the last kilometers on foot, stretched out in a chain. While the soldiers are waiting for the attack, the French invite Erzberger's delegation to negotiate with Marshal Foch. He accepts the Germans, but wants them to ask for a truce, since they need it more. When Erzberger asks, the Marshal hands him a folder with a document that sets out the terms of the truce. The Germans have 3 days to accept them unconditionally without discussion. The fighting will continue during this time. If Erzberger wants to stop the bloodshed, he can sign the document right now. The order comes to the front, and the soldiers are sent to attack. One by one, they get out of the trenches and run towards the enemy, straight into oncoming fire, falling into mud and puddles. Before Paul's eyes, an explosion kills the sergeant running ahead, but the attack does not stop. Some lucky ones manage to get close enough, including Paul. He throws a grenade into the trench and runs to finish off the enemy. His comrades who have broken through clear the trenches and throw grenades into the dugouts. The hero has to kill a young Frenchman with a sapper shovel. While clearing the area, the heroes do not miss the opportunity to fortify themselves with captured supplies. Suddenly the earth begins to tremble, scaring away even the rats. The Germans who have captured the fortifications take up defensive positions and peer into the smoke from which the first tanks appear. Rifle and machine gun fire are of no use to the steel monsters. They devour meter by meter. Return fire from tank guns forces the Germans to take up a deep defensive position. Some of the personnel flee. The tanks reach the trenches and drive over them, crushing and shooting at the enemy infantry. As they drive past, Paul's detachment follows them. Having split up in the confusion, they first manage to immobilize a tank with one grenade, and then stuff another into the machine gun nest. Following the equipment to the trench, flamethrowers approached and burned out the dug-in Germans. The detachment opens fire on them, but is soon forced to retreat. Paul runs back when he is thrown back by an explosion. Stunned, he looks at what is happening around him, seeing how the surrendering crop is burned alive by the French. At this time, Erzberger's delegation discusses the terms of an armistice, similar to a full-fledged capitulation of Germany. However, there is not much choice. Erzberger orders the adjutant to send a copy of the demand to the government to obtain consent. Having reached the trench, Kaczynski sits down at the machine gun. He manages to knock out one flamethrower when the sergeant orders a retreat, taking weapons and supplies. Paul runs across a field with other soldiers when enemy planes come at them. He falls into a huge crater and, unable to get out, freezes at the bottom with a knife in his hand. The hero sees a Frenchman aiming at him, but the explosion throws him into the same pit. Paul runs up to him and stabs him with a knife before he can reach his rifle. They lie side by side, one exhausted, the other choking on blood. Unable to listen to the death rattles, Paul crawls away and lifts his helmet onto sticks. It is immediately knocked off by a shot. Having caught his breath, the young man tries to help the wounded man, cutting his coat with a knife and treating the wound. But it is useless, the Frenchman dies in his arms. He takes his documents so that he can someday find his wife and report that he is guilty of her husband's death. Erzberger receives a response from the government. He is ordered to make peace, despite the harsh conditions. Paul, having escaped from the battlefield, walks past the rejoicing soldiers. They celebrate the end of the war. But the hero is not happy. He goes to the hospital, where he looks for his platoon. He finds one wounded in the leg and consoles him. He gives him a woman's scarf, a trophy of Franz, who died during the retreat. In the kitchen, Paul finds Kaczynski. He is arguing with the cook at the distribution. They bring food to the wounded comrade, but he, taking advantage of the moment, pierces his neck with a fork. Friends press on the wound and call a doctor, but the comrade dies in their arms, not wanting to remain an invalid after being wounded. Left alone with Kaczynski, Paul tells that his parents were against his participation in the war. He discusses how to live with what they went through. But Kaczynski is not in the mood for philosophical conversations. The military elite of France and Erzberger's delegation gather in Marshal Foch's carriage. Foch refuses to compromise, despite the admonitions of his opponent. Erzberger has no choice but to sign the document, agreeing to all the demands. The armistice will come into effect at 11 a.m. on the 11th day of the 11th month. And while the soldiers rejoice, the German general experiences deep moral discomfort, considering this a personal defeat. He orders the recruits to gather in the yard in the morning. At dawn on November 11th, Kaczynski looks through the broken glass. He listens to the silence that he has become unaccustomed to during his service. There is no shooting, no rumble. Kaczynski goes to get food with Paul, discussing plans for Christmas on the way. Having reached the farm, Kaczynski gives Paul a lift. Now it is his turn to steal. The young man climbs into the barn. Having stuffed the eggs into his pockets, he sees a boy in the doorway, the owner's son, who locks the door from the outside. Having kicked down the door, Paul runs away while the farmer shoots unsuccessfully after him. In the process of escape, the stolen eggs are broken. The soldiers fill a bowl flowing from their pockets with liquid, which they drink raw. Having left, Kaczynski enjoys the silence, when suddenly he hears a click from behind. It is the farmer's son with a gun. Paul hears the shot and goes to look for his comrade. He is alive, but wounded in the stomach. Paul drags Kaczynski back so that the medics can treat him. They are caught up by trucks full of joyful soldiers, but none of them stop. Then Paul has to carry his exhausted friend on himself. When he drags him to the infirmary, Kaczynski loses consciousness. The doctor examines the wound and tells Paul the bad news. He tried in vain. His friend is dead. The hero does not want to believe it and tries to shake his last comrade. While he is grieving over the death of his friend, the general gathers his recruits in front of his residence. He orders them to recapture the positions from the French before the armistice officially comes into effect. Someone shouts that he will not go to fight anymore, and according to the laws of wartime, he is immediately put up against the wall and shot. The rest obediently set off. There are 15 minutes left until 11 o'clock, when a battalion of Germans attaches bayonets. The French in the trenches rejoice at the end of the war and are ready to drink in honor of such an event. In the morning fog, the Germans quietly and treacherously creep up to the fortifications, breaking into a run. Their war cry is carried in the air, and the French prepare to defend themselves. Machine gun fire kills everyone around Paul. He hides behind the corpse of a horse, where a grenade flies. The hero returns it to the sender. The battle continues. Paul kills several people, saving the life of a newcomer, which he himself recently was. He is almost drowned in the mud, but the hero manages to wriggle out. The fighters fall down the stairs into the dugout, where Paul is pierced with a bayonet from behind. He falls to his knees, trying to breathe. At this moment, the order is given to stop the battle. A truce has come. Paul, with his last strength, gets up and goes to the exit of the bunker. Carefully climbs the stairs and sees how the wind carries ashes into the sky. His eyes fall on the poster hung by Kropp. When the clock struck 11, the Germans and French disperse in different directions, carrying away their wounded. The sergeant gives the order to the rescued Paul Junts to collect tokens of the dead. One of them is Paul's token. The film ends with an informational note that in 4 years of military action, the line of contact on the Western Front has hardly moved from its place, despite the fact that more than 3 million people died there.